The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
After originally looking like he was going to be safe, Antonio Pierce is in fact out.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As the coaching carousel continues to go round and round and round for the silver and black, where is it going to stop? Who knows? But they're now looking for a head coach once again. And my guy Raider Mike in Colorado actually sent me this by way of text on Tuesday and said, Q, the Raiders coaches since their last Super Bowl appearance, Bill Callahan, Norv Turner, Art Shell, Lane Kiffin, Tom Cable, Hugh Jackson, Dennis Allen, Tony Sperano, rest in peace, Jack Del Rio, John Gruden, Rich Bisaccia, Josh McDaniels, Antonio Pierce. Since the last time they were in the Super Bowl many, many moons ago, back in the early 2000s. And they've had 7 coaches in the last 13 years. Obviously, there's no consistency there, right? I think the Steelers have had, 3 head football coaches in the last, 40, 50 years? Something like that, some ridiculous number. Like, you've got to find a way to have some kind of consistency. And unfortunately, they just don't. So now Antonio Pierce is out. Many people are excited about that because, he just didn't get it done. Winning 4 games is not going to do it. He says it all the time. It's his words, not mine. It's a production-based business. If you don't produce, you won't be in business. So AP is no longer in business. So who's going to be up next? And, of course, we talked about it many times. The easy name to connect with the Raiders is Mike Vrabel because of his connections with Tom Brady. And Mike Vrabel's available, right? He's already taken interviews. He's already talked with the Jets. He's going to be talking with the Patriots on Thursday. And to be honest, I think this bad boy gets wrapped up for him coming up Thursday afternoon. By the time that interview gets over, I think you're going to get an announcement pretty quickly that, the Patriots have hired Mike Vrabel to be their next head football coach. That's just my gut feeling of what's going to happen. Maybe the Tom Brady effect can help put a full court press on him for the Raiders. We'll see. But the Patriots already interviewed Byron Leftwich. They've already interviewed Pep Hamilton. So those 2 head coaches right there, again, I hate to say it, I talked about it in segment number 1, they satisfied the Rooney Rule. So now they're free to hire whoever they want to. They can make that hire quick, fast, and in a hurry. And again, they're trying to get things done as quick as possible. Now, the one thing with the Raiders is even though I feel like they're behind the 8 ball, they're a little bit behind schedule because they waited to move on from Antonio Pierce. That tells me that they've been doing some back channeling. They've been doing some conversations. They've been reaching out. They've been looking to who's available and who would be interested. Again, I say it all the time, and I said it in segment number 1. I've never got a job that I applied for, right? All my radio jobs, podcasts, this job right here, someone reached out to me to gauge my interest. That's what you always do. Even in the position I'm in to be in charge of the radio station. If I was going to make a change before I do, I'd reach out to somebody that I know, somebody that I'm comfortable with, that I know knows how to do the job that I would expect them to do and say, hey, if I was going to make a change here in Vegas, what would the chances be that you'd want to come? And just throw it out there, right? And that's just how things happen. That's how you do the back channeling. And there's no doubt and not a bone in my body that believes that hasn't been going on. Again, there's no reason why it took 18 weeks to decide that they were going to move on from Antonio Pierce and a couple days. I feel like that there was a couple people that they were reaching out to, and there's been reports from folks like Josina Anderson and Albert Breer and others that, there's a couple candidates that the Raiders have been looking at. Mike Vrabel is the easy one to connect the dots. And if you're going to bring in Mike Vrabel, at least he's got a good track record. Right? I mean, he went to the AFC Championship game. He went to the AFC wildcard game. He went to the AFC divisional game, all with the Tennessee Titans. And, he didn't win those games. I believe he's 2-3. Yeah, he is 2-3 overall in the playoffs, but he has above 500 record in his career as a head coach with the Tennessee Titans. And for all purposes, everyone's, conversation and all the research I've done on Vrabel, he's one sharp coach. He's one guy that knows all the rules. He knows little loopholes. There's a lot that he knows, and just a well-respected head football coach. So he's one of the guys that I would look at and say, okay, I can get on board with that. Because my biggest thing, even though there's names out there like Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator from Detroit, who's the hotshot offensive coordinator, he's never been a head football coach. I don't think that you should get a guy that doesn't have experience. You just had a guy with no experience in Antonio Pierce. I think you have to get a guy, and I said this about the Bears as well. When the Bears opened up their job right after Thanksgiving, when they fired Matt Eberflus, I was on the radio that day, and I said, what they need to do is they need to hire someone that's been there, done that. Not someone new that's trying to feel their way out and say, okay, this is how I think we'll do it. This is how, it's done when I played at this team, and this is how other coaches did it. Somebody that's been there, done that. Somebody that can walk in and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This all stops now, and we're going to get to where we need to be, and this is how. And, oh, by the way, let's not forget, Raider Nation, they're in the AFC West. Andy Reid, he'll be a Hall of Famer. Sean Payton, he'll be a Hall of Famer. Jim Harbaugh, he'll be a Hall of Famer. Why am I saying that? Because the division is going to be tough for some years to come. Andy Reid doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Obviously, Mahomes isn't. Sean Payton and Bo Nix, they look fresh and ready to roll. And Jim Harbaugh, I mean, he could probably go on forever. And, of course, he's got Justin Herbert. So whoever's going to come in and compete, I don't believe needs to be someone that's a new booty. Someone that's just getting some experience because, well, they're a hotshot coordinator. Now, if that's what direction they go, okay, that's fine, right? But just understand what it's going to be and that it might take a little bit longer and there might be some more patience that's needed. So Ben Johnson, obviously he's a hotshot name, the offensive coordinator from the Lions. He's a guy that's going to be having a lot of interviews along this process. Aaron Glenn, same team. Lions, but he's a defensive coordinator. He put his best work on film on Sunday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings when that defense was just, man, that defense, that just choked folks out. That choked out the Vikings. Sam Darnold didn't have an opportunity to breathe. He was blitzed on about 56% of his dropbacks. Even Justin Jefferson only had 50-something yards receiving. Shout out to Amik Robertson, who, by the way, held him to 3 catches on the night. He did a fantastic job. Former Raiders cornerback. Shout out to Amik. 5'9" Amik going up against Justin Jefferson, who arguably could be the number 1 wide receiver in the league. Right? So Aaron Glenn, he put his resume out there so everyone could see on Sunday Night Football. He's getting a lot of requests, so he's available. Another name, and I mentioned this a couple days ago, and it's been mentioned to me as well, Pete Carroll, former Seattle Seahawks head football coach. He's a veteran. He's a guy who's a Bob the Builder type guy. He likes to, be able to turn things around. He went to USC and turned things around, won a national championship there. He was doing NIL before NIL was a thing, but he still was able to win a national championship there. Obviously, a Super Bowl winner in Seattle, should have won 2, but they didn't hand the ball to Beast Mode. They decided to want to throw it. But you see what he was able to build there. My problem with Pete Carroll, and I had someone call me out on the radio on Tuesday and thought I was being like biased to him because he was old. And I said, it's not that he was old. It's just the fact that he's going to have to bring someone in that's going to be able to develop a young quarterback, develop an offense. Like that's not proven. He's a defensive-minded guy, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But we all know that the Raiders struggle the most offensively, so he's going to have to put together a really good staff, right? He likes to build, don't get me wrong, and he would love to compete with Harbaugh. That's for sure. He'd love to compete with Harbaugh twice a year. And, of course, Andy Reid and Sean Payton, he's not going to back down to them. That would be, a guy that's got skins on the wall, so I can get behind that, but he has to have a really good staff to go along with them. So I'm kind of lukewarm on Pete Carroll. Again, I like the guy. I love his energy. He's, 73 years old and has a ton of energy. I can appreciate that. He'll get everyone motivated. He'll get everyone rah-rah and ready to go. That's for sure. I'd be interested in see what staff he brings to the table. But he's a guy that I know my guy Vinny Bonsignore has floated out a few times. And as I say all the time, Vinny doesn't just grab a name, pull it out his backside, and throw it against the wall and hope it sticks. He just doesn't. He gets that from a place of he's hearing from somebody, whether it's inside the organization or around the league, people that he trusts and people that trust him. So Pete Carroll's definitely a name to pay attention to. Mike McCarthy, I threw that name out there the other day. He's under contract with the Cowboys until the 14th. The Bears requested an interview with him, and the Cowboys denied that. I think he's going to end up back in Big D. I think Jerry's going to give him a contract extension. But as I mentioned before, his new agent is Don Yee. Just saying, Don Yee has ties to Tom Brady. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I think that would probably be a super dark horse, but that's a name that could be available if the 14th comes around and Jerry Jones doesn't give Mike McCarthy a contract extension. Obviously, he's done some really good things. Won a Lombardi there in Green Bay. A young name, Liam Cohen, offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay. I know a lot of people are high on him. He's done a really good job in Tampa Bay. Again, my big concern is that he hasn't been there, done that. He's the offensive coordinator, and he hasn't even been the offensive coordinator there in Tampa Bay very long. So that's my concern there, but he is a hot shot name to look out for. You'll hear a lot of people throw that name out there. Go hire Liam Cohen. And he's done some really good things with Tampa Bay. I'm not mad at that. But how about this one with the Tampa Bay ties? How about Bruce Arians? What about Bruce Arians? I know Bruce Arians stepped down because he had some medical situations, and I know he's, a year younger than Pete Carroll. I believe he's 72. Pete Carroll's 73. I like Bruce Arians a lot for every reason that I said about a veteran coach, a guy who's been there, done that, a guy that knows how to build it, but he's also, Raider Nation, a guy who's had success. Think about where he's gone. Even when he was at Temple in college, he had success there. But think about this. In Pittsburgh, when he was working with Big Ben, had a ton of success, right? Offensive coordinator, quarterback coach. Remember when he was in Indianapolis? He was working with Andrew Luck, and he filled in for Chuck Pagano when Chuck Pagano got hit with, colon cancer, and he filled in as the interim, had a lot of success there in Indianapolis. Then he went to the Arizona Cardinals. Remember Carson Palmer, after being the quarterback with the Raiders, going to Arizona and having a lot of success there? You know who the head coach was? Bruce Arians. And you want to talk about Tom Brady ties? Who did he win a Super Bowl with in Tampa Bay? Yeah, you got it. Tom Brady.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The San Francisco 49ers fired their special teams coordinator, maybe the worst kept secret that was going to happen.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We'll see if it's a happy new year for Brian Schneider, because the 49ers, they fired their special teams coordinator. I think a lot of people wanted this to happen, and we've talked about it a little bit on this show. You know, there are three phases to football, the three big phases. You got offense, defense, special teams. And everybody always wonders, who's the offensive coordinator going to be? Who's the defensive coordinator going to be? The special teams coordinator is just as important, or almost as important. And obviously as a 49ers saw, and I saw in the chat yesterday, as people are trying to find reasons as to, man, why did the 49ers lose? There were some people like, man, special teams, it was atrocious. And there may not be anything that Brian Schneider could do about your kicker getting a high ankle sprain. He comes back not healthy, missing a lot of kicks. Jake Moody, Wisnowski, he missed a lot of games. You know, he got hurt. I think not having him, not just as your punter, but also as your holder for your kicks, that can make a difference with some of those aspects of special teams. But I think just as a whole, outside of even the kickers, 49ers special teams unit, not very good. And it seems like special teams has kind of been an issue for the Niners. They've been trying to figure out different ways to kind of either work around it or fix it. Not sure exactly what the answer is, but for them right now, they feel like the answer is firing Brian Schneider.
Yeah, and that's the issue, is you have the coordinator and then you allocate valuable draft capital to the two kickers, and you think, okay, this will improve things. We'll have someone who's going to punt the ball down the field so no one will be able to have a chance to return it, and we're going to have a kicker that's going to be able to make 40 and 50-yard kicks. But the crux of the problem is just execution, and it always feels like anytime we're watching a football game with the 49ers in it, we can feel a fake punt coming, but they can't. And for every one time that they stop it, there's 4 or 5 other times where they don't, and it happened again in Arizona. It's a little bit strange, because I think the discussion becomes, this is going to be your third special teams coordinator, but under Kyle Shanahan, and let's be frank, even before that, it felt like special teams would always fall by the wayside, right? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the last time that a 49ers punt return was for a touchdown was Ted Ginn in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that's a long time ago. So this is before Kyle Shanahan, but during Kyle Shanahan's time, it does feel like special teams, for whatever reason, is just either something that they try to throw money at, which I mean by like draft capital and everything, instead of trying to figure out why it is that teams just can execute better on special teams and they can't do the little things. So I do think the coordinator thing was a little bit of a worst kept secret. It's just now, who's the next one? And if that doesn't change next year, then what's the discussion after that?
I think a big part of just being good on special teams is having people that are dedicated to being good special teamers, whether it is a returner like a Ted Ginn. Like, I don't think when the 49ers signed Ted Ginn, it was because he's going to be this amazing receiver. And although he did contribute as a receiver, his main contributions were as a returner for the 49ers. Back in those days, they had a guy by the name of Kasema Osgood, right? Osgood, he was a receiver, but where was he going to make his money? As a key contributor on special teams. There's a special teams player on the Dallas Cowboys right now that actually came from 49ers. Goodwin, I believe. He was a 6'4" guy, kind of went from receiver to defensive back. But most importantly, he could run. He was a high flyer, and he was a guy that was going to really contribute to special teams. I think the last time the 49ers were actually pretty good at special teams was probably when Raheem Mostert was a gunner. And he was really good running down there on punts, on kicks. So I think one thing that the 49ers could do, aside from hiring someone that maybe has a slightly different philosophy than what they got from Brian Snyder, but find like who's going to be your special teams ace? Who's going to be that guy on the special teams unit that you feel like, what, teams are going to have to really account for him, and he's going to make a difference. Because I think right now, whether it's as a gunner or a guy in the return game, the 49ers kind of missing that guy.
Yeah, for sure. And special teams ace is the best way to put it, like a Matthew Slater type, right? Like he's consistently in the Pro Bowl, all pro at that position. And it is funny that you bring up Raheem Mostert because that's exactly who I thought of. And funny enough, that was during the Chip Kelly time. So Chip Kelly kind of knew what Mostert could do. So yeah, it is interesting. I think the discussion is more now, what's going to happen with this new special teams coordinator? And then if it doesn't pan out, then when do we start to say, well, what's really going on, Kyle Shanahan, behind, closed doors with the special teams? Are you paying attention to it at all? Do you really care? Or are you just like, hey, we're going to prioritize this and that, and that'll figure itself out? And I think the most frustrating part is if the 49ers were a net zero average special teams team this season, they probably would have won a few more games. And that's not even me asking them to be special. It's just asking them to be average and give you just nothing. But they gave away so many points based on special teams, whether it's missed kicks or, obviously returns or just, not downing the football. It's frustrating to watch professional football players look like they're out of position the entire time. And hopefully a coordinator change is going to change it. But if not, then we got to start asking Kyle about, hey, what are you guys prioritizing over there?
King Theo in the chat says Olin was supposed to be that. He's a Pro Bowl gunner. And that is someone that they did bring in for special teams unit. And not just him, there was Oren Burks as well. They brought him in to kind of be a special teams guy. Burks, by the way, it was just reported what he had, like 17 tackles in week 18 game. So not just contributing on special teams, but also as a linebacker as well, getting some extra time while some guys are sitting. Special teams, it's one of those right now, I'm a head coach and, I got to hire a defensive coordinator, hire an offensive coordinator. And the one thing I haven't even addressed yet is special teams. And it's one of those most important units, especially in high school football, because high school football, man, that field position can flip really quick. If somebody just has a dynamic player on the other side, more times than not, it's just your best player. He's back there returning. That could hurt a squad. And it's crazy, even with me knowing that, it's still one of the things that I still have not addressed yet. And I'm like, well, we'll get there. We'll get to special teams. Let's get this office coordinating stuff and defensive coordinating stuff situated. I hope that's not the thought process of Kyle Shanahan. He has a lot more resources and a lot more options than I do. I have to find somebody that knows a little bit about special teams and kind of build off of that. He has guys that, truly want to be good as being a special teams coordinator, even if that's all that they do. So hopefully the 49ers, they really start to prioritize that even more. Whatever he's done and whatever he thought that this is enough as a special teams coordinator, more, whether it's the coach, whether it's the players, whatever you thought you've done and you thought that was enough, it clearly is not enough because this has been a unit that has consistently, I don't want to say failed the 49ers, but it's definitely been an issue. Do you foresee any other firings happen? A lot of people are looking at Nick Sorenson. They're like, okay, we haven't heard from him yet. You're seeing some of the coordinators around the league fired. Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator, he was fired. Some head coaches fired. Some offensive coordinators fired. But right now, Nick Sorenson looks like he still has his job. Is that something that worries you moving forward? Do you think Kyle Shanahan is like, you know what, let's build on this year? Yes, it wasn't great. It wasn't good at all. And a lot of people are really upset about the protection the 49ers got defensively. But, hey, man, there's some injuries. I really like you. We're going to get it together. You're a first-time coordinator. Do you think they keep Nick Sorenson around, or do you say nope, he'll be axed in the next few days?
I have it at 50-50, and here's why. Last season, when the 49ers were a top 10 overall defense in EPA per play under Steve Wilkes, it was the worst kept secret that Steve Wilkes was going to go, right? And they had a much better performing defense last season than they did this year. I think when you listen to everybody speak about Nick Sorenson, regardless of what people outside the building are saying about him, it's kind of glowing. Kyle says, I like what he's been doing. Nick Bosa, I'd like to run it back. Demo Lenore, I like what they did. Like, for someone who is a sure firing, they sure are saying a lot more nice things about him than they ever did when Steve Wilkes was there. And that was a better defense last season, even if we were frustrated with that one. So I'm 50-50. I do believe that there is a little bit to the thought process of we can't go into this next season with another defensive coordinator regardless. But either way, whatever defensive coordinators brought in here, I don't think they're going to be allowed to revamp everything. And then the other thing, too, about the Sorensen discussion that I feel like is lost in translation is because the 49ers have been playing so long into the season, so late into the season, it's been hard for them to get into the saddle and talk to people because everybody starts doing business the day after they're eliminated. The 49ers were having a bye week. They were getting ready for the divisional, then the NFC Championship. And they called Belichick, and Belichick said no. They called and tried to get Spagnuolo. Spagnuolo said no. And then they ended up with Sorensen. So I wonder if the dynamic is, you know what? A lot of guys were hurt. We had our flashes. Look what happened when Greenlaw came back and when Hufanga was back and the defense looked a little bit better. I wonder if that sample size and the context around the season with the idea of we can't have another defensive coordinator going into the season overlaps any sort of, hey, we got to get rid of him and we got to get somebody else in here. So I'm 50-50. I think it can go either way. That's probably not an interesting answer, but I'm just talking about like the way they've been speaking about him, Croc. Like, again, last year with Wilkes, they're telling everybody that he's not going to be around regardless. And they made it to a few plays from winning the Super Bowl. And then on the flip side, this defense is underperformed, and yet they can't go out of their way without saying so many nice things about Sorensen. So I guess that's the way I'm looking at it, is just the way that they're speaking about him.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Looking at the wild card round, the Vikings are slight favorites on the road against the Rams. They're falling hard to the Lions. The Vikings, they got to go to LA now as the 5 seed. Get Minnesota favored by 1.5. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Best news we could have possibly gotten on Tuesday.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers.
Daniel, well, after Rashawn Slater was a late scratch against the Raiders, we were all very, very concerned. Fortunately, Rashawn Slater made his way back to practice and is hopefully ready to go for Saturday because it is a big, big game. As we all know, it's one and done. Speaking of that, Coach Harbaugh, is he going to be more aggressive in these situations now that it's definitely one and done? There's no tomorrow. You got to go get it done. And the Chargers absolutely cannot overlook the Houston Texans.
Yeah, man, it's been making me feel pretty uncomfortable just how lopsided the analysis has been as far as the Chargers being such prohibitive favorites, but it's not going to be an easy game. But you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you can get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. David, I know you went to a dark place when Rashawn Slater was held out of the Raiders game in Week 18 due to knee discomfort while stretching. Then when Jim Harbaugh was asked about it, he said, we're going to get an MRI as soon as we possibly can, and also basically said it wasn't a move that happened out of abundance of caution. The doctor said he couldn't go, and he didn't go. So, I mean, it left us all like, man, well, you're feeling really good about this matchup and getting the 5 seed, but without Rashawn Slater, it changes a lot, and I think we saw the impact of that, especially early on in that game last week, and credit to the offensive line who bounced back. Joe Alt moving to the left side seamlessly. But you need Rashawn Slater in the playoffs. And so after hearing literally nothing until Tuesday and then finally hearing Jim Harbaugh say, hey, Rashawn Slater is going to be back at practice today, David, he missed the entire 2022 season almost, and then ended up missing a playoff game where he was supposed to potentially come back the next week. And I felt terrible for him. So for me, if he's limited at practice, if there's any possible way for a super tough dude to get into this game, he's going to do it. And I think this is just gigantic news that dramatically changes the Chargers' chances in this game.
Well, and he's having an all-pro season, Daniel. He's been absolutely phenomenal as a pass protector and as a run blocker. He has been crucial to the success of the Chargers offense. And we got to put it into numbers here. The Texans have two guys that have combined for 23 sacks between them. Rashawn Slater has allowed 3 sacks all season long, and 2 of those came against the same team against Myles Garrett, which also it showed that Rashawn Slater wasn't right with those snaps because he just doesn't lose that badly. And oh, by the way, that's 3 sacks and 22 pressures in over 547 pass blocking snaps. So that is pure, unadulterated dominance from Rashawn Slater at the left tackle position. It is a absolutely imperative that he is out there and ready to go to protect Justin Herbert's blind side. Hats off to Joe Alt. He did a great job switching over to the left side, but now you have your 2 elite pass protectors back in business on both sides. Rashawn Slater on the left and Joe Alt on the right.
It just doesn't give you an obvious weakness at tackle, at least, right? That we know the interior has had their struggles, but to have, one tackle where you know that you can kind of try to attack that and you know that it's going to be a chink in the armor, to not have that because it's basically a pick your poison going up against Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, who's also been absolutely fantastic. Like, having both of these guys feels like you can at least limit what the biggest strength of the Texans defense is in this game, and that is those 2 edge rushers, right? The Chargers' biggest stresses and their biggest weakness so far this year has been the interior. They have some guys on the interior that can definitely give the Chargers problems, but it's not like what they have on the outside, where if you don't have good tackles and you're going up against this pair of edge rushers, it's going to be a really, really long day. And I think it just also gives Justin Herbert the best chance to play his best, which is what you need in this playoffs, because we know if Justin Herbert gets banged up, he isn't always the same player, even if he goes to try and, tough it out there. So the fact that you have both of these guys going into this one and done matchup, as you put it, right, a game that you have to have, it just really, really changes how I feel about this game, because I would not be feeling great about it if he wasn't out there. And I do believe he's going to be playing for this team on Saturday unless there's some sort of regression this week. But the Chargers also, in other news, did open up the 21-day return window for wide receiver Simi Fehoko, who obviously is more of a special teams guy, more of a run blocking guy as far as what he brings to this offense. At the same time, definitely a good glue guy and someone that basically said publicly, David, that he was good to go. So it makes me think, hey, with Josh Palmer not practicing, with the kind of, the uncertainty around that, hey, he could be going back this week and be on the field on Saturday against the Texans. Yeah,
and Simi Fehoko was a guy that in the offseason and into training camp, did absolutely everything he could to be able to earn a spot. And into the preseason, he shined. He made all the plays that came his way, and he was able to really secure that kind of one of those last wide receiver spots. Yeah. And he unfortunately only got to play 8 games, 6 receptions on 16 targets for 106 yards, 17.7 yards per reception, which is great. But yeah, this is a guy who is definitely going to add an element as a run blocker. He's got great size, 6'3", 220 pounds, and he is a guy that enjoys this type of work. He enjoys the dirty work. He wants to get in on these plays. He wants to contribute in any way possible. And so getting this type of guy back, I think, is just another bit of reinforcements for this Chargers offense.
Yeah, and I think especially with what the defense has on the Texans side of things, you're going to need somebody else to step up outside of Quentin Johnson, outside of Alain McConkey. They do have 2 good corners over there they're going to be matched up with. But that's going to leave a really good matchup for whoever that third guy is. I don't think it's going to be Simi necessarily, just because even when he was with the team still, the last few games he had 3 targets and 0 catches, so it wasn't like he was a huge part of the offense. But when he was making plays, they were big plays, and they were big plays down the field. But a 36% catch rate obviously is something that's pretty inefficient, and it would hope it would be a lot better if they are going to, want to target him, give him some of those chances down the sideline and show that he can convert on them. But it does bring us to this from Donald Rickert, who says, assuming that there's only one more player that can be brought back from IR, aside from Simi Fehoko, who we know could get activated. Who would you choose realistically? And David, it is a Chargers mailbag, and this is a great first question to get into because the Chargers now have one activation left. You get 2 extra in the playoffs. We assume one of those is going to be Simi since they opened up the window on him. Picking that other guy is a little bit tough, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's really only one other guy in my mind that kind of makes any kind of sense, and that would be Asante Samuel Jr. And unfortunately, we haven't heard absolutely anything about his injury. I mean, about him potentially coming back, nothing. No whispers of any kind. Yeah. And the thing is I don't even know if I even want him to come back, which I think the reason why is he played 4 games and he had 4 missed tackles, and all of them were big missed tackles that led to big, massive plays. Cam Hart and Tarheeb Steele. Cam Hart came in and played 11 games, has 2 missed tackles in 460 snaps. Tarheeb Steele, a couple more, 12 missed tackles in 785 snaps, but he brings 4 pass breakups and 4 interceptions to the table. So if you're going to take some of those chances, you better have the reward to go with those risks.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, there's a few guys they could do it. I mean, that's just really the guys that we know aren't season-ending injuries, right? I mean, it's basically Brendan Rice, who we still haven't heard anything about, in the same kind of camp as Asante Samuel Jr., where it kind of just popped up out of nowhere, and we haven't heard anything about it since. Another guy's Jalen Reagor, right? Another dude who you've had some deep success with on this team. Hard to know. I mean, I think this is a broken hand, so, I mean, potentially not a season-ending type of injury. You could also throw Eli Apple. Maybe David wants Eli Apple over Asante Samuel Jr. I mean, he was playing well when he had to suit up on short notice. So there's not a lot of options there, but I do think it does kind of just shine more light on how weird the Asante Samuel Jr. situation is, because even if you could have him, I still think it is a positive because it doesn't necessarily mean he's starting. He is a good coverage player at his best, and if you had these dime packages and things like that you wanted to put out there, he's a guy that you feel like could help you in those situations. I'd probably rather have him on the field than Jasir Taylor. So I think that would definitely be someone I would bring back. But there's just no inkling or any sort of news at any point that Jim Harbaugh's ever been asked about it, that he's given any inclination that he's going to be back on the field